Excited about everyone here and everyone that's online. We're going to get started right away. We're going to finish at 1:30. But just listen. This is a quote from the Course in Miracles. What could you want forgiveness cannot give? Do you want peace? Forgiveness offers it. Do you want happiness, a quiet mind, a certainty of purpose, and a sense of worth and beauty that transcends the world? Do you want care and safety, the warmth of sure protection always? Do you want a quietness that cannot be disturbed, a gentleness that never can be hurt, a deep, abiding comfort, and a rest so perfect it can never be upset? All this forgiveness offers you and more. Do you feel the power in that? That's the Course in Miracles. And again, we're so glad that you are here. My name is Karen Williams, and I'm actually a part of what I would call, and all the other board members here, are part of the spiritual leadership here at Unity. And I'm just thrilled to be able to teach and co-teach, because Wendy Wonderly, wonderful Wendy Wonderly, is here. And we're going to co-teach and tell you about the Course in Miracles. And I wanted to start off right away and say, A Course in Miracles. A course, not the Course in Miracles. It's just a course. And so the course is, which we'll call that either Course in Miracles, sometimes you'll see it written as ACIM as far as the letters for it. But a course makes a difference between the course, because it right from the beginning tells you it's a way, not the only way, but it's a way. And it's a course. It's a self-study is what it is. And it's a course in miracles. And miracles is, how do I change my perception of what I see with these body's eyes? That's the miracle, that you change your perception of what you're seeing in and out in the world. So it's a self-study, it's an awakening of Christ consciousness. And I have found it to be the way, for me personally, that has awakened, truly awakened that sense of consciousness of, I am the Christ as you are the Christ. We're talking about the universal Christ. We are talking about, in the Course it says, the Son of God. Now it has gender, but there's no gender in God. The Son of God, daughter of God, child of God. If anything triggers you by words, move it into something that doesn't trigger you. And if it does, there will be a point in the workshops we'll do about the Course. It's deep healing. It's not surface stuff. It's deep healing, and you will find anything that would trigger you can also be healed. And it's an amazing, amazing journey. It actually claims it's the fastest way to awakening. It actually claims that, and I want to be sure I get this right, that, you know, ancient people said it will take 1,000 lifetimes. Buddha did it in one lifetime. The Course says that if you actually practice what's in the Course, this mind training to change your perception of how you see the world, that you will save thousands of years. That's a pretty big claim. It also, if you really think about it, it's saying that there is reincarnation, and that your lifetimes that you have here, all of them are for the purpose of learning how to get back home. And we'll go over some of that when we talk about 3 worlds to give us a good foundation, something that we can then hang on to as we go through the Course, in the sense of these 3 worlds or these 3 rooms that we'll talk about. But it also mentions that reincarnation isn't really happening because you've never really left heaven. So we'll get into that too. However, it is about our lifetimes, and it's the fastest way to experience really this absolute deep inner peace, to the point where you can live your life and realize if there's anything that disturbs you, that there's a way to heal it. That's what the Course, as we will go through, teaches, and as you practice it, in fact, it's a absolute amazing, at least for me, and I know for Wendy as well. It's not a religion, again, it's not a movement, so there's no sense at all that I want to, in any way at all, change your beliefs, or change your thoughts, or change your feelings, or your actions. It's not about that. It's about your own self-study in how you can begin to have a thought or what's in your mind and then begin to change it so that you can then live in a peaceful, joyful, abundant way. The Course says this: the journey to God is merely the reawakening of the knowledge of where you are always and what you are forever. And many of you may even have heard this. It is a journey without distance to a goal that has never changed. And we're going to hit that a little bit later. It's a journey without distance. Sometimes you can say a place to which I've never left. Because it's got the foundation of you're dreaming, you're asleep. That's why we talk about the reawakening or the awakening or the enlightenment. If you're dreaming, then it feels real, but when you wake up, there you are, still in bed, right? So when it's talking about a journey without distance, in other words, you're not going anywhere. You're just asleep. And it talks about that reawakening. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the genesis of the Course because it is a channeled material, but it's really important that you don't have to believe in channeling to believe in what the Course is saying. And that, you know, sometimes when people hear channeling, it can really turn them off because, you know, sometimes people, their eyes rolls and they're now in the 65th dimension of someplace and the voice comes out that's kind of deeper or different. That's not what we're talking about here. But it is channeled material. However, Helen herself said, there's no way I could have written this on my own. She becomes the means to which she writes it. And what's amazing about it is that the Course in Miracles came to be, it was actually published in 1975, came to be because there was two research psychologists in the Big Apple. Okay, they were at Columbia University there, and they could not get along. One of them was Dr. Helen Schuckma, and the other one was Dr. Bill Thetford, right? I always refer to him as Helen and Bill. That's why I had to look to Wendy to what's their last names again? But Helen and Bill could not get along. I mean, to the point where finally it was that Bill said, there has to be a better way. How many of you ever got there with somebody? Yeah, most of us. This has got to stop. Or something's different's got to happen. There has to be a better way. And Helen agreed. Then Helen begins to hear a voice, not of God, a voice for God. And it's identified as a voice of Jesus, as the elder brother Jesus. Now, the thing about Helen is, first of all, she's an atheist. Second of all, Helen is a psychologist who's hearing a voice. Right? And so, as an atheist and as a psychologist, she's hearing the voice, no less, she's Jewish, and she's hearing whose voice? Jesus. So it's a very unlikely scenario of this woman at the university having material channeled through her as inspirational and as the depth to which it's written, but that's the reality. 7 years, and Helen could take shorthand, so she actually took heard this voice, and she went to Bill and said, I'm hearing this voice. And he said, well, write it down. And she started to write 7 years. And she would take her shorthand notes and then go to Bill and would say, this is what the voice said, and Bill would type it up. The third player that came in was a guy named, again, a psychologist, Dr. Ken Wapnick, and he then came in with Helen and Bill, created the foundation of Inner Peace, which is the first one to publish the Course in Miracles. This is, you can see it's a pretty well-worn, loved book by me. And he actually organized it, they edited it, and came out to produce this in 1975. And they sold like 1 million copies. It's never been advertised, really, or marketed it much. Helen never made a penny on it. She didn't even put her name as the author of it. So that's the background of it. And of course, like any good self-study or material, is that you will see there are other versions of the Course in Miracles. And Wendy will talk about that in a little bit. But that's the history here of, sometimes we refer to this as the blue book, only because there's a purple book, right? And Wendy will unpack the mystery on those two things. So that's the history of it. And I wanted to mention that for Helen, one of the important things that happened, Edgar Cayce, you guys know the American clairvoyant, that he died in, 1945, I think. His son read through, before it was ever published, read through the A Course in Miracles, and he said, it's the most advanced material I have read along with my father's material. And for Helen, that was like, okay, all right, we should publish this then. And when you think about Edgar Cayce and his ability of predictions, I mean, to me, that what a stamp of approval there. And when we think of Jesus, I want to read from the Course what he says about himself. And to think of him as he is the elder brother. And he says, I was a man who remembered spirit and its knowledge. As a man, I did not attempt to counteract error with knowledge, but to correct error from the bottom up. I demonstrated both the powerlessness of the body and the power of the mind. By uniting my will with that of my Creator, I naturally remembered spirit and its real purpose. So what he's saying is, why can you listen to me as an elder brother? Because I'm really awakened to my connection with God. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but Wendy's going to give you a little more background.
Thank you, Reverend Karen.
The irreverent Karen. Turr.
I'm going to borrow Karen's beat-up book here. I have a book, but now this is my book, and my phone is my book, because it's just too heavy to cart around everywhere. Here we go. This is the introduction. This is A Course in Miracles. It is a required course. Only the time you take it is voluntary. Free will does not mean that you can establish the curriculum. It means only that you can elect what you want to take at a given time. The course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. It does aim, however, at removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. which is your natural inheritance. The opposite of love is fear, but what is all-encompassing can have no opposite. This course can therefore be summed up very simply in this way: nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. So when I first read that, I thought, what the heck? Nothing real can be threatened? Have you looked around recently? Nothing unreal exists? Well, yeah. If it's unreal, it doesn't exist, but... And it was very... It didn't make sense to me, and so I went on a few more pages and has things like, there is no order of difficulty in miracles. One is not harder or bigger than another. They are all the same. All expressions of love are maximal. Really? All expressions of love are maximal? Because I kind of feel like I love some people more than others. And just saying, sorry, Jesus, but I might differ a little bit here. And I could go on and on. But something about it engaged me, and I kept with it. And I'd read these words, and I'd try and make sense of them, and with limited success, I'll be honest about it. And hopefully through our workshops, we can help make more sense of them quicker for you. That's the goal. But I could just feel the truth and the power in it, and I knew that the issue was with me, not with the teaching, and so I really stuck with it. And the course has the text. It also has workbook lessons. There's 365, so you can do that in a year. And I was reading one earlier this week, and it said, among other things, "For your heart will recognize these words, and in your mind is the awareness that they are true." And I thought, yeah, that's what it was like for me. My heart recognized the words, but, it wasn't happening. So, if any of you would like to share a little bit about, just briefly, if you have had any run-ins with the course, or if you'd like to... Any takers? Thank you, Ben.
Sure. I came across this other book you have there, The Disappearance of the Universe, and I had read through that. I've never read A Course in Miracles. I have a copy and have kind of looked at bits of it, but that was my introduction to it. But it really, I would say, was life-changing for me. And it's been a long time since I've read it, but it had permanent changes in the way I thought of life and saw things. So.
Wow. And I will say, that's what I was going to say next. I had the exact same experience. That book blew the door wide open for me for A Course in Miracles.
I think I bought my first Course in Miracles book in the 80s, and I tried looking at it, and it made no sense. It was just crazy language, and I put it on the shelf, and it sat there for how many years? This is 40 years, and now I'm into it. I can't say I'm understanding it perfectly, but I'm getting more and more of it.
And my experience has been very similar to that as well.
Okay, so when Marianne Williamson made these books popular, it was during the AIDS crisis. I lost lots of friends, family at that time, and the teachings in there were such a light in the dark to so many people who were suffering, who all of society just washed their hands up. And my husband was a psychiatrist, and he practiced a lot of what he learned in these. He was really the one that studied them. I was more just going along for the ride. I studied New Thought, and I could see that everything kind of went along. Now I'm studying Buddhism, and I'm thinking, wait, I think that principle I've studied, and so I'm really excited to study this again, because it's going to be new to me.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other brave soul? Pardon? Okay, so Reverend Karen wants to know just why are you here if you're not familiar with the Course?
I had been intrigued for years. I did buy A Course in Miracles years ago, and I was like, the person in the back, I can't remember her name, Tammy. It just sat on a shelf. I just couldn't digest it at the time. I wasn't ready. I wasn't primed. Now I feel like I'm more open to understanding what it's all about. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Well said.
I came to Unity 18 years ago, right after my husband died, and I was looking for more. And when I came to Unity, there was a Course in Miracles study group, and I was in it for about 6 months, and then the minister changed. I was in the Indianapolis congregation. The minister changed, and the study group wasn't there anymore. And I tried to continue it on my own, and it's like, no way. I needed other people to try and help me understand what was going on, because I was new to New Thought. And now, 18 years later, I've done a lot of study on my own, and I have a lot more understanding. And I still think a group is going to be a lot easier, a lot better for me than just by myself. But I think I'm in the same boat as Lisa in that I think I'm ready to actually pay attention now.
Fantastic. Anybody else? Okay. If you change your mind, just raise a hand. So before I said that when I first started reading it, as others have said, I don't think it's an unusual experience that it didn't make a whole lot of sense. And when did you start reading it? Oh, when did I start reading it? I don't know, 20 years ago, maybe. I started, went on the shelf, and then I'd keep kind of bumping into it. I'd hear like Wayne Dyer would quote it from time to time, and it was actually Wayne Dyer that recommended Gary Renard's book, Disappearance of the Universe. And I highly, highly, highly recommend this. This is not that the Course isn't in plain English, it's in very plain English, but this is just a little easier to approach. Spells it all out, connects all the dots. So I went from thinking it making no sense to saying, this is the only thing that really totally makes sense of the world. And I do believe that. When I was 16, my father died, and it was very traumatic. He was a wonderful person and a wonderful father. And at that point in my life, I'm like, well, why did you do this, God? If this is God's work, say, oh, it's God's will, if this is what's going on, I don't want any part of this. And so I turned my back on God, and I lived without conscious connection to God for many, many, many years. And it was actually, I think, kind of humorously, through my great love of animals. We had all these dogs and everything, and they all got ill and sick and ailing, and I learned all these techniques to help them. I learned how to work with chakras and energy fields and all kinds of good stuff. And I was always looking for new techniques to help out, to help serve, to help do these things. And at that point, when I bumped into it, it appeared like, oh, A Course in Miracles. This is great. Someone spelled out how you can do miracles. I'm in. And it was at that point that I really tried, unsuccessfully. And then it was still sort of in my awareness, and came across Disappearance of the Universe, and then went back to it and have never left. I love this has changed my life so much. Let me restate that. This has changed my experience of life so much.
Wendy, would you mind getting more specific about how it has changed? Because I've heard that a couple of times in the room, and I want to know more.
Ooh, yes.
Can you repeat that for the people online?
Dave asked me how specifically my life has changed. So I've always had a pretty good life, I think, aside from the father dying and, stuff like that. But it's made me, to adopt this method of thinking, has made me a lot more loving, a lot less reactive, a lot more forgiving, and most importantly, it's brought me back to God. And I have the realization now that there is only one desire, and that is to be connected to God, and to not be afraid of that desire, because that's where it's at. If you can connect to God directly, and that is what this is about, everything changes. I look at all of you, and I see these beautiful souls here. And 20 years ago it would have been, oh God, do I have to do this? Does that answer your question? And it's improved my relationships. A Course in Miracles is really primarily about relationships. The way that you reconnect with God is to reconnect with the God in other people. And I started out just by, you could achieve that in a year if you were, really, really, really working it and had support. I've been working it for 10 years. Each year's been a little bit better. In my early years, my goals were more modest. I just wanted to, my first goal, the first thing was I realized I wanted to do it. And then my goal was, okay, I'm going to look at people and I'm going to look for the divine in them. I'm going to look for the God in them. And if you look for it, you see it. And if you don't look for it, you don't see it. Unless they're like full-on beaming. So that was one kind of baby step. And, I've graduated to more thy will, less mine sort of philosophy. But that was big, that was huge for me. I was very much an introvert and not really wanting to interact with people a whole lot. I had my animals. But now it's like, yeah, this is great. People are, and not everyone all the time, but you can if you but when you have that focus, you will see it. Like the quote from earlier in the service, what you look for, what you want, you will see and you will get. And the goal is to want only love. And then you see only love. Okay, I'm trying to stick on the outline that Reverend Karen has given me here. I just highly recommend this book, Disappearance of the Universe by Gary Renard.
Why?
Because it really, it just really spells it out. He gets into, in a much more direct way, that God is only love, and therefore so are you, so am I. And there really is only one of us here, and that is love, that is God. We're just not in touch with that. So God didn't, so the Course isn't, it has these Christian terms and, miracles, Jesus, atonement, salvation, sin, but it's certainly not Christian enough for Christians. Because it doesn't talk about, burning in hell in the afterlife. And that's one thing that never made sense to me that Gary explained a little bit better. Now I see it in the Course when I read the Course, but Gary explained that, God didn't, cast us out here like dice and say, okay, let's see who can make it, Let's see who's going to do the right stuff at the right times and who's going to believe in me. And if you don't, whoop, too bad for you. And that God loves you. God doesn't hate you. God does not hate you because you're unworthy. God doesn't hate you. You are not unworthy. None of that is the slightest bit true. Yes, Tana.
I like that it says that there's no sin, it's just error.
That's a very good point. So that's another distinction that Tana brought up, that there is no such thing as sin, there's only error, and error can be corrected. Much better way to live. And certainly I'm not above errors, but I'm not a sinner. And that God didn't sacrifice his only son to atone for our sins. I mean, no guilt in that, right? It's just that's not how it went down at all. It really truly is all about love. It's a course in Christ consciousness, and Christ consciousness is bringing out the Christ in each of us. Because it's there. That's who we are. If we can peel away the blocks to love, that's what we will be in touch with. That's who we will be. Okay, so the structure of the Course, A Course in Miracles, you've got the text, which is 1 billion pages long. You've got the workbook lessons. There's one for each day of the year. There's a manual for teachers. Turns out we're all teachers, so it's for all of us. There's a clarification of terms, there's supplements, there's all kinds of stuff. What I would encourage you to do if you haven't done it is to just pick it up, start with the workbook lessons. You don't have to believe in them. Just give it your best shot. Eventually, your mind will catch up with your heart. And also read a page or two a day, and maybe get one or both of these very helpful books. Gary doesn't pay me any money. I don't have any association with him whatsoever, but I'm going to recommend his book again. And then also another one. This is called The Heart of A Course in Miracles by Michael Murdad. He was the spiritual leader of what used to be called Unity of Sedona, which is now called the Global Center for Christ Consciousness. And he has also a very approachable way of getting through the Course. Yes?
I think it would have helped me back in the 1980s if I would have known that there's like a wraparound language that happens in the Course in Miracles. That it brings up something and then it'll bring it up again and again and again. And I didn't know that.
Tana just noted that the course is actually very repetitious. There's really only a few concepts that get repeated one way and another way and another way and another way. It really is very simple. Once you get it, it's very simple. Getting it is maybe a little harder to do. Yes? Is the workbook a separate book? Well, this is a combined volume. You can buy the workbook as a separate book. Okay. This one has all of those in it. Okay. The blue book. There's also the purple book, which is the unedited book. So I would recommend that you start with the blue book because this is the one that the team that was closest to approved, the edited version. Yes, Phyllis?
What do you mean by unedited? What's included in that that's not in the blue book?
A lot of stuff that was edited out. So notes and I think it's actually a little distracting and confusing to start with the purple book. That's my opinion. There's also a number of what they call texts, which are also unedited versions. This is an text. There are others. I wouldn't recommend touching any of the others. They're not approved, and they can be really, really tough sledding.
Wendy,
Yes.
responding to Phyllis, I like the purple book because in the very back it has what they call cameos. And it talks about specifically, it's like Helen talking to Bill, and then Jesus coming in and saying, this is what you might have done instead. So we're like little stories, and I find them very interesting. They also have a definition of terms in the back, which has been real helpful for me.
Tana notes that there's some discussions in the back between Helen and Bill and whatnot. And yes, that's all here, and it's all interesting. I would say though, when you're first going through it, focus on on the message, yeah. And then later on, you can come back and go, oh yeah, that's cool. Now I know more about it and the Genesis and all. Yes.
Did Helen and Bill become friends?
Yes. It worked. It worked.
It's the last chapter.
Yes, Helen and Bill did become friends. Yes, and although Helen, I guess, remained prickly to the end, they did have a very, very good friendship. Okay. Oh, one other little juicy tidbit about the A Course in Miracles is most of the later chapters and workbook lessons are mostly written in iambic pentameter, which is what Shakespeare wrote a lot in, what the King James Bible version is a lot in. It's very lyrical, it's very poetic, it's very beautiful. And it's something to enjoy. Apparently Helen loves Shakespeare, so so it was a little perk that Jesus threw her, I guess, later on. Okay. I think at this point I'm going to turn it back to Reverend Karen.
Thank you, Wendy. Hopefully everybody has a handout, right? Yeah, on one side you should have where it says the three worlds, and then the opposite side of that should be some quotes that I'll mention as we go along and of the Course in Miracles. This particular, the three worlds, is actually from Michael Murdad's book here, and it's the heart of A Course in Miracles. And he outlines a lot of the primary concepts, love, forgiveness, illusion, reality, all these different things, and goes through the Course in Miracles by picking up the different concepts. Michael Murdad, I have to say, who is now in Sedona, the Global Center of Christ Consciousness. Wendy and I continue to participate online, so anyone online, I want to when they talk about being online, I'm an online person. I'm not in Sedona, Arizona anymore, but I follow their services. I continue to participate in his workshops, and he was really, for me, the teacher that really opened up the Course in Miracles for me. And so he's written a number of different books. He's not going to be for everyone. He's very clear about that. But he also is an amazing teacher and healer. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time getting a foundation of when and how to move forward as we begin to talk more and more about the Course in Miracles. And like I said, it's out of Michael's book, but he basically says you have an understanding of, and he calls it the three worlds. And if you notice, the first is like just a circle, and it's like a disc, so if you think of it as kind of like sacred geometry, you have a disc, and then if you pulled that circle down, okay, then you end up with the Vesicus Pisces.
Vesica Pisces.
Yeah, thank you. Which is the bladder of the fish. If you put, it's like the fish either swimming one way or the other way. And then that's another world. But you'll notice then it also then has a transect with the lower world, if you will. Okay? So there's a lot of like kind of sacred geometry when you're thinking about this. One of the things Wendy and I put together for this workshop, and I decided not to do it, was you can also relate this if you want to just think about those worlds, and if you don't like the term world, think about it as rooms. But you can also always think about it as kind of like your first three chakras would be the first world, your heart chakra as that fish bladder, that's the in-between, and then the lower circle as your body, right? So the words that Michael put together here, Michael Murdad, is God. So when you think about this world, it's God. It is the creator of spirit, pure spirit. This is really important to get, that it is spirit, it is heaven, it is bliss, it is knowing, and you can add your own words to it. What we're talking about here is absolute goodness. It is, if you want to use Unity's words, one power, one presence, and what that means is there's no dualism in it, okay? There's no opposite. And that's where we would talk about at Unity, absolute goodness. Absolute goodness means there's no badness. There's no naughtiness. This is the world, okay? This first world is really important to remember because it's where we were created, okay? And when you think about it, and I gave a talk here once about if God had written the Bible, he would have said, "Let there be light. It is good." The end. That's us. God is only love. He wants to extend that love and creates us as light. This is why Jesus stood up and said, "I am the light of the world, and you are the light of the world." He was talking about this world that is our true being, our true self, our true identity. And just as Wendy was saying, if anything creeps in and says you're not worthy, you're not good, you're more than complete or whole, it's not true. It's a lie. That's what the Course in Miracles is saying here, saying that we are God's creation and that's what we exist. We're Holy Spirit. The problem is we've forgotten that identity. See, and so that's what you are. You're in this world. But what happened is you slipped down. See how I'm making the fish bladder? You slipped down, and when that happened, that means you forgot who you are. And at that point, you're in that fish bladder, and what does that fish bladder says is you basically are now no longer in heaven, you're in Eden. This is the Garden of Eden, really, where there's a choice then between the tree of knowledge of good and evil. See, that's not the first world.
I'm just curious, I know a lot about fish, but so are you talking about what causes a fish to be able to continue to swim?
No, it's not.
I don't remember an explanation.
Yeah.
So
Thank you for bringing that up.
It's not a fish bladder. It's just the fish shape. It's that elongated.
All right, thank God I asked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a symbol of creation. It's found. It's in the circle of the flower of life and all that. And
Yeah.
if you think of the creation process of being the circle is perfection, is God, but then we.
So it's not an analogy, so.
No.
No.
The fish.
It's actually a literal definition of
Vesica Pisces
Vesica
is
Pisces.
fish bladder.
Yeah, if you Google it, yeah.
Okay,
But,
well,
yeah.
I stand corrected.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
still prefer to think
Exactly.
of it as something
Right,
else,
right.
but
It's more important to, yeah.
okay.
Okay, good question. Yeah, don't get hung up on the fish, all right? Yeah. Yeah. You might, if that's difficult for you, it might be better to think of it as, if you're familiar with chakras, your third eye. That's the symbol, kind of. But, okay, so you're in the world of God, and then you're slipping down. That's the fall, if you will. I like to think of it better as the veil, okay? Because it covers up, like a veil, like a curtain, it covers up you seeing the pure world of God and love. Because in this world, you begin to recognize there's opposites. The knowledge of good and evil. And it's in this world, too, that you could say this is the Christ that is born, in the sense of that with that Christ comes a consciousness in this world. And in that consciousness, in Eden, is also where you have a reality, and the reality is really the world, it's the real world, where you begin to recognize in this place, if you think of it in your heart, it is the chooser. Because you see, you're in between, you're choosing. Are you going to go to the holy mind, which would be the first world? This is your higher mind, is in your heart, or are you going to go to your lower mind, which is basically fear-based thoughts controlled by the ego. And I like Wayne Dyer's definition when you think of the ego, which is anything that's fear-based. It's basically your ego, you're edging God out. I like that definition. I think it's a perfect definition. That anything that edges God out. So in this second world, if you will, is that place where you can be in your right mind. And if you're in your right mind, the opposite of that would be, look at the, what's it say? The wrong mind, right. So this is a place where you are choosing God's reality, which is you're remembering because you've forgotten the first world. So in your heart, you are choosing and making a conscious decision to tap and remember God and who you truly are, your true identity. It's also the place, though, where you are choosing, you can choose not to remember and forget, and then you're in that lower world, that third world. So these are the kind of concepts that that you'll find throughout the Course in Miracles. If you get a sense of what world are we talking about, because it will always talk about your choosing your decisions on a daily basis. That you forgot who you are. That's the problem, right? And the Course says there's one problem you have. It's you forgot who you are. Your true self, your true identity, that you are the light of the world. And in that one problem, there's one solution. And what would the solution be? If your problem is you forgot, the solution is to remember. Remember who you are. Remember who you are. We were just on a Caribbean cruise, and one of the singers on our cruise actually wrote a song called Remember Who You Are. And Phyllis Hyman, it ended up being in the 70s, I think like a 16th on the Billboard. But she was a R&B singer and made it very famous, actually, except for you may not know it. But anyway, Remember Who You Are. But it's a beautiful song. But to me, it's just like, you know, when I heard it right away, this is what comes to my mind, you see, as I study the Course in Miracles. It's like, oh, remember who you are. Every day you are here, but you're home in God. So what the Course in Miracles and what Gary Renard's book, and as much as the clarification of it, it's kind of out there. I mean, you read it and it's like, it's channeled material coming from Gary, from two people who visit him. He calls them Arden and Persia, but beings who show up in his living room. And again, he spends, I think it's a 10-year process for him to write this book. And they visit him as he's going through the Course in Miracles and explaining the Course and saying, you need to write a book. And it's absolutely fascinating, but I mean, it does basically tell you that, and what the Course is saying is, you're in heaven with God, you're an extension, and what happens? This is where we got to get into these quotes. First of all, the first quote after nothing real can be threatened is about the first world. Spirit is the state of grace forever. Your reality is only spirit. Therefore, you are in a state of grace forever. So that's what the Course. So you can see, that's your reality. God is but love, and therefore so am I. Another quote. And then, here's the fall. Okay, you're moving from that down into that second world of the heart, into eternity where all is one, which is where you are in the first world. There crept a tiny mad idea at which the Son of God remembered not to laugh. That's how the Course says. It says, there you are, and all of a sudden, because you are an extension, but you also have free will, that you had just for a second, not even a second, a nanosecond, you had an idea, a mad idea of what would it be like to separate from God? And the world goes dark. The world doesn't really go dark. It only goes dark because you fell asleep. And what it says is you are there sleeping in heaven, and you just haven't awakened yet. So the entire journey of falling, being in the garden, then kicking yourself out. God never kicks Adam and Eve out of the garden. They kick themselves out. And then they separate and separate and separate and divide and divide and divide and divide and divide. Why do you divide and divide and divide and divide and divide? Because you no longer believe you're one. So that tiny mad idea, rather than go, which puts you in the Garden of Eden where there's consciousness, instead of going to the other tree in the garden, the tree of life, Course doesn't say that. I'm adding that because I think it's helpful, which is a tree of forgiveness. You could have forgotten it right then and said, man, I had this mad idea. I thought, what would it be like to separate from you, God? How can I separate from you? That's an impossibility. How can you separate from all that is? You can't. You can't run. You can't hide. There's nowhere you can go that God's not, you see. And instead of just forgiving and being done with it and waking up and continuing your life of extension and love and bliss and knowing and oneness, instead you went to HE double toothpicks. I call this the world's presence, power, and poop. Because it's a lot of shit that hits the fan in this world. And you and I know it. And we see it every day. Okay? So the idea is you're sleeping and you're dreaming. Just like you do at night, you go home, you go to sleep, you're on your bed, and then you have... How many of you here dream? Yeah. Or have had a dream. Almost every hand should come up at that point, right? But when you wake up, where are you? You're still in bed. That's the concept of the Course. You're in heaven. You actually are dreaming that you're asleep, and you've dreamt up this entire world. And it's put you in the wrong mind. It's put you in an illusion. And you're actually having a journey without distance to a place you've never left, or as the Course says, a goal that's never changed, which is you're the light of the world and only the light of the world. And there you are in heaven. And when we went to that second world where we make decisions, God said, because he's not going to leave his world. He actually says, I didn't create your world. And that's kind of hard for people to grasp when they read that in the Course. He said, I didn't create this. I actually have nothing to do with this. This is your doing. However, I will give you a gift in your heart or soul or your higher mind, whatever terms work for you, okay? I'll give you a gift, and it will be a consciousness of Christ. Or another term would be Holy Spirit, which is the gift that God has given us to live within us. And that Spirit, that Holy Spirit, never leaves the world of God, but is very much aware of the world we've created. So the Spirit then says, no matter what goes on with you in your life, I am putting before you this isn't the Course, this is just my way of explaining it, like a golden brick for you to step on. And you can decide to keep that golden, which is kind of the gold, the abundance coming back to God. You can step a little bit, or you can step a lot. And that's the lessons we have to learn. And what are those lessons? Everything that comes to you and I in this world is to wake us up. Because we're sleeping. We need to be awake. And it can be done the hard way, or it can be done the easy way. And part of, I think, what the testimonies, if you will, of those in the Course, from Wendy and I certainly, is we're choosing to do it the easier way now. And the easier way, what the Course says, is really forgiveness. It's not the kind of forgiveness the world gives. It's the kind of forgiveness the Course teaches is the deepest healing possible of forgiveness. So for me, because I'm a pretty sensitive soul, believe it or not, you know, and I was born to be a good girl. And that's what I was. I was born to be a good girl. I wanted to be a good girl. Ever since being a little kid, I just wanted to be a good girl, which meant I do whatever my mother wanted, you know? And so for me, it was when I heard the criticism, when I was working so hard to be good, was hard. And so when I hear that criticism, you know, your tendency in that third world is what happens is this. Well, you said that to me. Well, I'm just going to think you're awful. And another thing about you is I don't like is this and this and this and this and this. See, and the Course in Miracles taught me, see that light and don't go to this and this and this and this. Just let it be. Let it go. I mean, that's part of what the Course, so that's my own testimony to it. It's changed my relationships in that it put forgiveness as the 24/7 creed to keep me in the thinking, because it's a spiritual psychology, is what it is. It's a mind training to turn your thinking back to who you really are, to remember who you are, as defined by God, which is, I am love, and therefore you are love. Look.
I was curious, you said, like, so we're sleeping and you need to wake up and you can do it the easy way or the hard way. And you said the easy way is forgiveness. What are you alluding to, the hard way?
Great question. Luke just asked, what's the hard way to learn? Well, you know, the hard way to learn is our tendency to think that we're going to satisfy the deepest desires of our hearts with something in this world. So the hard way is your attachment to anything in the world that you're thinking is going to give you satisfaction in the purest sense. In some ways, I'll tell you, the hardest way for many people is, well, I married you. Hey, you know what? I like you. Okay, yeah, let's get married. Oh, well, you're not at all what I thought you were. And you divorce. Not a problem, right? Okay, and then you meet the next person. This is the hard way. Oh, I like you. Let's get married. Well, you're not the person I thought you were. And you divorce. And then you meet somebody else. Oh, well, hey, you have a little more money than the other two. I'm sure this is it, man. And you marry him. And guess what? You divorce. That's a pattern. So the reason I say that is there's a difference between you learn the easy way, which is I'm willing, even though it's hard in the moment, I'm willing to really look at what do I really think about myself, and where do I think of myself as unlovable? I'm getting to deeper stuff here. Unlovable. Where do I think of myself as unworthy? Where do I think of myself as inferior? Or where do I think of myself as superior? Doesn't matter. You can go that way too. But you're willing enough to look at it, to heal it, which is only through forgiveness of yourself, and to change your mind. This is the spiritual psychology of the Course in Miracles. So then you're not repeating the same pattern. So to me, the hard way is you keep doing the same thing, which is basically insanity, right? So, you know, you change what you can and accept what you can't until you can change it, right? So that's the hard way. The other hard way is just thinking, oh, if I only read one more book, if I just read one more book, then I will become an enlightened being. You know? And in everything I'm saying here, the Course basically says you're living in an illusion in a world. Now, does that mean that when I come over here, and I know it's okay that I can put my hand on, you know, she feels like, wow, she's strong. I know that. But I'm feeling solidness, right? And that's what the ego does. The ego says, as soon as you begin to look at your problems, because he doesn't want you looking at your problems, the last thing he wants you to do is heal, because you created the ego, therefore you gave him power, and you put a soul contract saying, as long as you believe in me, I will be in your life. That's what we each did. So as soon as you say, you have no power over me, then ego says, yeah, but go over there. Doesn't that feel solid to you? Isn't that problem real to you? And it kind of bangs you against that all the time. And let me just say, if that's a tough concept, because that's why a lot of people just won't get into the course. They're like, well, that's foolishness. It's nonsensical. Well, I mean, just think of it in the sense of what your body's eyes are seeing is always perception. You're only perceiving it. And as I perceive it is very different than Phyllis is going to perceive it. You know, one of the things you do when you solve a problem sometimes as a group is you say, how do you see this problem? How do you see this problem? How do you see this situation? And you'll get all these different perceptions, and then you come together in some consensus to say, oh, well, it seems like we agree on this or don't agree. Okay, that's what we do. So what's really important is that even if you can't buy into it's not real, know that what you're perceiving with your body's eyes are false distortions. They're only the perceptions that you've seen from your point of view. And basically, in that world, they're false. They're false. And how do we see that in that third world? How do we see? We think that if we get more money, we can become more satisfied. If we have the right, correct relationships, we will be happy. So what it is the truest desires of our heart, which really is, again, one problem, that we think we're separate from God. One solution, we now are connected to God. So every desire that comes from this world is really it really is pointing us to our truest desires, okay? So if you want a relationship, and a good relationship, what you're really after is a good relationship with God. But we read it as a partnership. And the thing why this world is an illusion is because everything dies. In the first world, right? Look at that first world. God, heaven, bliss, and knowing. It cannot die. God is eternal. You've heard that? If he's eternal, he cannot die. So anything that can die is not real. That's the sense. So I just want to point out a couple more quotes here. Okay, so here we are in this world of, remember that, it's right in the middle of the page, remember that you always choose between truth and illusion, between the real atonement that would heal and the ego's atonement that would destroy. Atonement, by the way, is like the Course defines it really as an undoing. So what it's saying is that as soon as you think you're separate from God, that mad idea that you have, it is an error of consciousness, which is the way that you could define sin, which, by the way, the Bible actually doesn't have the word sin. There's no Hebrew word for sin. The best it can mean is you missed the mark. It's like an archer. You're just missing the mark. So it's just an error in consciousness. And so the atonement here is really referring to undoing that error of consciousness and then it goes on, it says, but the ego's atonement would destroy. Okay, so, and some people like to think of atonement as at one meant, right, which is helpful, I think, at one. So either you're at one with God or you're at one with the ego. Okay. Therefore, lay judgment down, not with regret, but with a sign of gratitude, as it was all illusion, nothing more. You know, the world you perceive is a world of separation. The world you made is therefore totally chaotic, governed by arbitrary and senseless laws, and without meaning of any kind, for it is made out of what you do not want, projected from your mind because you're afraid of it. Yet this world is only in the mind of its maker, along with its real salvation. Do not believe it is outside of yourself, for only by recognizing where it is will you gain control over it. So this is talking about the mind. And by the way, this has nothing to do with the brain, all right? We are talking about the mind. You can think of it as the holy mind is the first world, the higher mind of the heart, and the lower mind of your fear-based, controlled thoughts from the ego. And of course, we all know thoughts lead on to how you feel. Feelings, to me, are just a status of where your soul's at. Your feelings are either, the Course of Miracles says you have two emotions, love and fear. So your feelings are either going to point to love or they're going to point to fear. That's all they do. They just kind of like tell you the status of where your soul is. But as you think, then on to your actions or your manifestations in the world is what that's about. And make no mistake, this is an insane world, and do not underestimate the extent of its insanity. Well, you know, there's no other time than today that I think that the world...
I just want... You skipped one quote, and that's the one that I thought was the most important one on the table.
Well, I did that just to see if the teacher would correct me.
Because to me, it seems more important than anything else on here. Every decision you make stems from what you think you are and represents the value that you put upon yourself.
Could you please
read that again, Phyllis?
Okay, what I said was she skipped the only quote she skipped was one that I thought was the most important one on the page. And it says, every decision you make stems from what you think you are and represents the value that you put upon yourself. And boy, that spoke to me.
That's a good one.
Mm-hmm. Okay, how are we doing with time? Okay, we want to leave a little bit of time for a meditation. Any questions? Anything that you want to add? Anything I forgot?
There's a love offering basket at the back. That's what she forgot.
Thank you. Yes, yes. Yeah, Wendy and I are not taking any funds to do any of the Course in Miracles workshops. However, if you're so moved and as you're able, there is a basket in the back. And if you are brand new and have not been to Unity before, if you don't mind giving us your name and address and contact, we'd love to keep you informed about the workshops. We will be in the future going over some different concepts. We do know, I think I'm going to do the last part, Wendy. We do know that the next workshop that we will have
It's April 16th.
is April 16th. Wendy and I we're just going to go to Turkey and the country of Georgia in between. So we're going to do it from noon to 1:30 again, and have plenty of substantial snacks. We have so much more to cover. I mean, we're just scratched the surface. But anyone have any comments on what you've already heard or things that didn't quite make sense that I've gone over? Mm-hmm.
So what do you think to the Taoism? Because this is it sounds very familiar to me. growing up in
Wendy?
Asia, in that culture background.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Repeat
There's a
the question. Or
The
just,
question is there any connection between A Course in Miracles and Taoism? Yes, there absolutely is with Taoism and with many, many other religions, in that there is one world, there is one being. A lot of this can be seen in many of the ancient truths. Absolutely. And you don't, it doesn't read, you can be a Christian and do the Course in Miracles. You can be a Buddhist, you can be a Taoist, you can be Muslim. You can have a religion and you can still use the principles in A Course in Miracles to make that religion even better for you.
and one of the things that is important, like when you think about what the world that you see is an illusion, is that don't forget to laugh. And actually, Edgar Casey actually at one point even said that Jesus often knew the insanity of this world, and he would laugh. He would laugh at it. Now, where it becomes in a very practical application is, as you know, the world has got a lot of issues right now. And we've always had issues, but, you know, when you consider climate change and you consider the war of Ukraine and the attack on a rule-based international order with why we're supporting Ukraine is because we don't believe an autocrat should be able to take over a country. You know, all the things going on there and the voices that are out there, part of what is happening is we are in a tremendous time of transformation in this. And what's happening, and I've said this many times, is Christian churches are moving more to New Thought churches. And by the way, there's a revival going on right now at the Asbury College in Kentucky and it's hitting all over. The fundamental Christians are in the middle of a revival happening across the states. And New Thought churches have to move more to Christ consciousness. That's my personal opinion, and that's why I'm so glad to be a part of teaching and sharing about this consciousness, this spiritual psychology that's in the Course in Miracles that points to you and me about the Christ within to help us remember. So part of how you deal with what's going on in the world in a lot of ways is don't forget to laugh. Really, have a good laugh about it. It's like, really? Okay. Because during this time is the point where the ego's voice has to just get louder and louder. That's all it's doing. It's just going to get louder and louder. And I absolutely am convinced that we can change that if we're willing to be a part of the transformation, willingness to sit through workshops, willingness to begin to see more and more the light of the world, willing to pray in the sense of how you would pray, how God means it, which isn't, hey, get us out of this mess. God says, no hablo inglés, because He didn't create it. We created it. But the Spirit says, I'll guide you every step of the way. Remember that little brick I was talking about, those golden bricks? And what the Course says is you can go up that ladder. You can think of it as a ladder or world. You can go up that ladder a lot faster as you step on the golden bricks that take you home in the willingness. And that's what the Course says. It says all you need is a little willingness, and these tremendous things can happen. And then at the very end of the Course it says, and it takes a lot of dedication and a lot of willingness, but in the beginning he says just a little willingness to open your heart and take these steps along the way. But don't forget, it's an illusion in the sense of it's false distortions. Don't get hooked by it. Do what you can. And Michael Murdad, one of the things that he has taught Wendy and I, and we often repeat it to each other, know the truth and respect the illusion. So it's not saying, oh, deny your family, deny the things that you need. If your knee hurts, take the aspirin. If you have to have surgery, get the surgery. But don't for a moment think that medicine, those pills, that procedure in this world is what's going to heal you. And that's the healing of the Course in Miracles. It says, it's in your mind. It's in your mind. Do what you need here. Have a great relationship. Party like there's no tomorrow if you want to. There's absolutely no judgment. But you also don't do things that hurt you, because why would you if it doesn't move you forward into that awareness?
So I am having a really hard time laughing these days. And all of us who are coming to the workshop, we're taking those steps on the gold bricks.
Mm-hmm.
How will our stepping onto the gold brick change the governor of Tennessee who has banned drag shows, or who is denying children of LGBTQ plus parents from having health care?
Thank you. That was very well said. Don't underestimate the power of your personal transformation. It all starts with you. It's you. It's all of us, but it all starts with each one of us. And I think my advice would be not to run from those feelings. You can't just push them aside. Oh, those aren't real, because they'll come back and bite you. We've all tried that. But to feel them, to release them to God and refill with God, and then move forward as best you can and do what you can, but stay connected to God through all of it.
Yeah. And what the Course actually ends up saying is there's only one of us here. But we've scattered and we've divided and divided and divided and divided to now 8 billion people, right? And according to Marjorie Green Taylor, apparently 6 billion of them are immigrants, okay, coming in. Like, okay, really? All right. So that's fake news, right? It's fake news. And it's interesting because you hear that and it's like, wow, this is kind of tough, to take. But then it's kind of like that's the whole world. It's fake news, you know what I mean? So, but as one, it means that you have the power to change everything that you're seeing, and we'll get to this, everything you see and you're projecting out there and in someone is because there's a piece of it inside of you. It may even be unconscious. And that's what I'm saying. The Course in Miracles is the deepest healing I've ever known, because it says there's a piece of that in me. And as I heal that, I heal the world. And never underestimate that power to do that. And so you do what you can. Again, respect the illusion. Write the letters. Let your congressman know. Fight. I don't like the word fight. Stand up for the values you have of democracy or love in all those things. But don't get hooked. Don't get hooked by the ego. The ego wants you to believe it's all real. And it's going to destroy everything that you would ever want. And that's just not true. It doesn't have that power unless you give him that power.
But, and through it, to keep your center, to keep your connection, to be guided through it.
Right. And that, right.
We have one over here.
What you're saying, I think that these principles, unity, we always talk about move your feet,
Right.
the importance of that. And I think that
That's
you
it,
can be
right. I
so
think-
bogged down by the illusion that you can't, I mean, the illusion that, just like Marianne Williamson's speech recently, you know, where she's running for president, she said there's so many things now at once. You're not fighting against just one thing. But I think that when you focus on this, you still have the like mental strength to laugh and go on and be able to. I mean, for me, because I'm with you, I'm like, okay, it's just over.
And it doesn't mean that you don't take action, political or otherwise. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that first you connect with God, and then you do what you are guided to do, and then do it with all your heart, but keep your center.
I've been just thinking about a question. So we all have values, and because of that, we have our, projecting ideas on certain things or people. But once we choose a position, we are in a divisive. We are in that divisiveness. So how do we actually transcend that? I mean, I always think that if we can hold each other high in a loving space, I told myself that would be the answer. But a lot of time we are human beings, so we have feelings, and sometimes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I'm just talking about, I sometimes just kind of, it's in my mind debating where should I be so that I can handle that feeling or that emotions better without promoting that decisiveness.
Let me just add to that, remember the gift of the Spirit in us? And we have that available to us every moment of every day. And the best prayer in the entire world, if you will, is help me. The willingness to say, help me see this as you would see it. And there's lessons throughout the course that says, help me to see this differently. What that means is help me to see this from the perspective of you, God. I may have this value, hold it, it's your value. I may have this belief, hold it, it's yours. But you're willing to say, help me to see this differently. And the Spirit will never give up on you. The Spirit is there. It will not interfere or force ever. It has to be invited. And that Spirit, which is the same as saying wisdom, will then give you the discernment to see it differently. And if you don't, you just say, I don't know where this is going, but I'm willing. Just show me the next step, and you always will see the next step. The next step might be you pick up a book and you read a line, you say, oh. It might be somebody says a comment to you. Oh, it might be what you would even call a coincidence, but none of that is true. It's not a coincidence at all. It's Spirit coming into the world, our world, to lead us home, to take the next step on the next brick. And I think we have to close, Wendy.
We do, but I have one more comment.
One more comment. We're going to close with the last and final and most important comment that could possibly, we have a wonderful, part of the course talks about holy relationships and special relationships. So I am so glad that we have, I just know my place.
Which is right by her side, right?
Which is her place, too. Thank you so much, Phil.
Just also remember that those feelings of fear and overwhelmment, those are coming from the ego. And that's a reflection of the ego going, oh crap, they're starting to get more towards God. I better pull out the big guns. Don't recognize it. Don't give in to it. Recognize it. Say, ha, good one, ego. That's what, when something, especially choice, is happening on the news, it's like, oh, good one, ego.
Right.
But it's not, remember that, connect, move on. So if you're all willing to stay a few more minutes, yes, that's the right answer. What did I do with it? I had Somewhere I had a meditation. Okay. So let's spend a few minutes basking in God's love. How does that sound? Okay, let's begin our meditation by getting comfortable in our chairs, stretching out our necks and our shoulders, letting that chair support our full weight, knowing that that chair is supported by the floor, by the foundation, by Mother Earth herself, all of this supporting us. Let's take a few deep cleansing breaths in through our nose and out through our mouth with a sigh. Let it all go. Relax. And with each breath, let yourself go deeper and more relaxed and more supported in this very safe space, this wonderful space that we have here. And we're going to breathe in an aspect of God. And for today, that aspect is love. So we're going to breathe love in through our crowns and into our hearts on the in-breath. And then on the exhale, we're going to let that love flow throughout our bodies. Breathe in love. Love. Let that love flow to every place in your body, every organ, every gland, every system, every sinew, every molecule, bathed in love, permeated by love. And if there's any particular area of your body that needs a little more love, let's breathe it into that area. Love. Love. And even more love. From A Course in Miracles, Workbook Lesson 346. Today, the peace of God envelops me, and I forget all things except God's love. Lord, I wake today with miracles correcting my perception of all things, and so begins the day I share with you, as I will share eternity, for time has stepped aside today. I do not seek the things of time, and so I will not look upon them. What I seek today transcends all laws of time and things perceived in time. I would forget all things except your love. I would abide in you and know no laws except your law of love. And I would find the peace which you created for your child, forgetting all the foolish toys I made as I behold your glory and my own. And when evening comes today, we will remember nothing but the peace of God, for we will learn today what peace is ours when we forget all things except God's love. God's love. God's love. There is only God's love. And let's just bask another moment in that. God's love. And when you're ready, start to slowly come back. Stretch. Integrate this experience into your body. Seal it in. Never let it go. Remember, you can connect with this anytime you want. Anytime you need to, anytime you want to. God's love is always there for you. Thank you all so much for being here and sharing this with us. Namaste.